Okay, we're changing out the pump seal on a T5&T10 Temco pump. Step one is to remove the 5 Allen-headed bolts on the front of the pump seal with a 3/16 Allen wrench. The tools you'll need for this process are the 3/16 Allen wrench, a 9/16 box end wrench, a 5/8 deep socket, and a flat bladed screwdriver. We also use some plumber's grease on the O-rings and seals for ease of installation. But as you can see here, we're just taking the front cover of the pump off. I will repeat this many times in this video. When reinstalling these 5 Allen-headed at this point, with the cover off, we're going to lay the pump down flat. Use a flat bladed screwdriver at the back of the pump. The motor shaft has a slot in it for the flat bladed screwdriver, and then we're going to use a 5/8 deep well socket on an impact to back the acorn nut off. And all you're doing with the screwdriver is just holding the shaft in place while you can back the nut off. The impeller is actually threaded onto the shaft, so the acorn nut removes, and then the impeller will also unthread using the same process with the screwdriver on the back in the slot, and then just rotating the impeller. Now, once you get the impeller off, please note all the shims. Every pump is different. There could be 1 shim, 2 shims, usually not more than 2, but make note of them. Put them somewhere off to the side where you know where to put them back. In this case, there are 2 shims, which we are going to put here next to the impeller. At this point, you can see the seal and pull the seal out quite easily, the front half of the seal. There are 2 parts to this seal. The back part of the seal is actually in the housing, which we're going to remove now with a 9/16 box end Allen wrench, the 4 bolts that connect the pump housing to the motor. Now with the 4 bolts removed, we simply slide the housing off the shaft, and we're going to use a screwdriver, the handle of a screwdriver, to press the seal out of the housing, half of the seal out. The other half we'll take out with a pick or the end of a screwdriver, anything that. And you can see here we just pulled that half of that seal out. Yeah, it's the 2 parts. They actually go back together, but those are the 2 parts that make up the back half of the seal that goes into the pump housing. Now we're going to unpackage a new seal. Seal comes complete, wrapped in paper. Both halves of the seal are in the paper. You simply put the back half in the housing. We always like to use some plumber's grease around the seal to make it easier to put seals in. It does nothing to seal anything. It is simply a lubricant to make the pump seal slide in the housing better, not damage anything in the process. And you can simply push these seals in by hand. It does take some force, but it's something you can do by hand. At this point, we're going to put the housing back onto the shaft after inspecting to make sure it's fully in the housing. We're going to put the housing back on the pump, install the 4 bolts. Again, when tightening up any bolts on the pump, pump housing, housing to motor, housing to housing. There is no need to over tighten. It's best to use hand tools and not get carried away. So if you note, the bottom of the pump, which is the mounting of the motor mount there, if you notice the ear here, this ear is different than all the other ears of the pump. It's easy to know when installing this pump housing back on the motor that this odd shaped ear goes to in the down position, and it has a mating odd shaped ear on the front housing portion. Those two go together. If you just remember those two things, you'll be able to put this back together the way it was originally installed. Okay, now we're ready. After the 4 bolts have been tightened, we're going to put the pump seal back in, which we've done, and we're going to install the 2 shims. Again, we use a little plumber's grease on the seal and the face of the shaft just to make everything lubricated and easier to go together. Again, this seal, it is not you should not use a silicone or anything else. This is just a plumber's grease. Again, the ceramic seals go face to face. It should look like this when installed. Now we're putting the 2 shims back where they were when we disassembled this pump. They're just very thin, fine washers, but they are shims. Now, flat bladed screwdriver again at the back of the pump shaft, and we're going to thread this impeller back on. As you can see, he's rotating this in a clockwise rotation, and we're just going to hand tighten it up, and then we'll install the seal. There's an O-ring that goes over the shaft, and then the acorn nut will go on top and thread onto the shaft in the same clockwise rotation. Again, we're using a 5/8 box end wrench along with the screwdriver at the end of the shaft. And again, you do not have to over tighten anything here. Okay, at this point, we're putting a little more, some more of the plumber's grease on this O-ring. That's the housing O-ring. Generally, this does not need to be replaced when replacing a seal unless there's damage to it, a nick or something. There's really no reason to even have to touch this. Again, we're putting this pump back together in the same fashion where the odd-shaped ears are going to match up, and the outlet of the pump will be in a straight-up position, opposite the mounting foot of the motor. Now, I'm going to repeat myself again. Do not over-tighten these 4 or 5 Allen head bolts. As you can see, this is a cast housing. It is not intended for a high torque situation. The O-ring is your seal. You simply need to tighten these and not over tighten it. Once the 5 bolts are tightened, the Allen head bolts are tightened, you can see here that we're not putting much torque at all on this. Once that is complete, then you're ready to put the pump back. The seals have been replaced and you are ready to go.